How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Agave and Cactus Talk. Today we're going to be talking about agave, and I was doing my morning reading as I always do when I eat breakfast the other day, 2 days ago on the 28th, and there was an article published that day called Mexico Left with 500 million liter tequila lake after demand slows. So I read this article and I thought it was very interesting, and it'd be pertinent to anybody listening to the podcast to understand a little bit about what's going on in tequila, right? Like if you're a California agave farmer or distiller, and you're trying to see what your role is going to be in this future agave industry that's going global, you need to see some of the examples happening in the world today so that you can relate to it, learn lessons, and improve yourself, right? So this article was, like I mentioned, very interesting to me, and it's actually a pretty short read. It came out, as I mentioned, on the 28th. The author is Madeleine Speed and Christine Murray. And let's see, it's coming out of the Financial Times. And actually, I read this on the 28th, and now it's the 30th, and there's about half a dozen other, news networks that are starting to report on this and blowing this article up. So I thought, might as well make a podcast about it, because a lot of misconceptions are being just spread around. And then the Financial Times article is the first one and the most complete, so they actually talk about a lot more stuff. But the other articles only got snippets of it and chose and picked, right, to try to engage their audiences. So if you're going to read one of them, do read the Financial Times one, which is the first one that came out, because I've noticed that over the past few days. Because I read, I got like a little search query that's always saved on my Google, and you should probably do this too. You can put in your news, your Google News, or whatever news that you do, topics, right? And I've got agave in there, tequila, mezcal, raicilla, like all the things I want to read about pertinent to the agave industry. And news every day just fills in those little tabs and I read it. And a lot of the times that's how I come upon great research articles or papers, because they link to a lot of research papers or universities that are resources or lots of different places that you can learn from. So this article, talking about this big old 500 million liter tequila lake, struck out to me because they brought up a lot of really good points, but some of the points were a little bit, I think, maybe misconstrued a bit to, once again, because they're a news reporter, engage their audience a little bit and maybe create a little bit more shock value, right? So let's start off, going a little bit through the article. And by the way, the name of this podcast will be what happens when tequila supply is greater than the demand, because that's kind of what they're talking about and what I'll be talking about. So essentially, like I mentioned, 500 million liters, right? Let's put that into perspective. So the annual tequila production last year was just shy of 600 million liters. So it was like 599 million liters. And just gathering some of the data that they provided, that means that there's 5/6 of the annual tequila production of last year in storage. right? So almost a whole year's supply. When you do the calculation, it's about 88%. So there's 88% of last year's supply somewhere stored, right? And that number is always changing because if you know a little bit about aging, every year you can lose about 2 to 10% depending on where they're actually storing this stuff, right? So the hotter the climate, the more evaporation that you will get, right? And I'll talk about some of this stuff a little bit, but just, understand that for now. And, yeah, I think this is a very interesting number because they think it's like a huge issue that they're mentioning that tequila demand is falling the past few years. Consumers are spending less, and that generally it looks like 2025 is going to be a rough year for tequila. And when you look at it that way, I mean, I am in agreement with them. The numbers don't lie. Tequila probably will drop in demand in 2025. Just looking at the 2024 numbers and the 2023 numbers. But that doesn't mean that many companies and entrepreneurs will not benefit from this, right? So let me get into a little bit of that, right? So let me give some of the data that they provide first, right? So they talk about how in 2021, the best year in the past few years for tequila, there was a 17% rise in demand for tequila, right? So that's really good. I mean, 2021 inflation was pretty bad, but let's say, just for the fact of, or for the easiness of this equation, inflation was 5%. You know what I mean? So they overall gained a 12%, value, which is, double digit. That's really good. And then they don't provide 2022 numbers, but they provide 2023, and they show that in 23 there was a 4% rise, which already we're starting to see the troublesome signs there, right? Like in the economic data, because 2023 last year, inflation was about 3 to 4% most of the year. So if the industry grew at 4%, just looking at straight economics, straight money here, they grew nothing. They stayed flat. You get me? So that already, ding, 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 red flag, right? 2024, we only have a few months of the data. They say they have 8 months of the data. So that would be, what is that, up to August. So from January to August 2024, compared to 2023, the same months, there's about a 1.1% drop in tequila sales. So, or fall in demand, right? So instead of gaining, right, like that 4%, like in 2023 that I tell you was a flat really when you account for inflation, now we're in the negatives. We're negative 1.1, and when you account for inflation, I mean, you're looking at being actually like a negative 5% drop, negative 4% drop. It's not good. You know what I mean? If you put it into perspective of those 600 million liters, right? If you have a fucking 5% drop, that's over, 60 million would be 10%. So 30 million liters that are needed less. And demand or the supply, as they mention, is actually only gaining. New distilleries are being built. More capacity is coming online. But this supply may not be needed. And it's interesting that they correlate these things, actually, because me looking at Jalisciense towards the places that I see that are growing, I don't see Bacardi and Casamigos actually building new distilleries. I've seen, G4. I've seen lots of unique, what I would call traditional tequila brands coming up. And their numbers of growth are double digit, 10, 15, some of them even 20, 25%. And they're expanding capacity, right? So here's where the numbers don't tell the full picture. Because sure, Bacardi and Casamigos, there's an oversupply of that because people don't want to drink shitty tequila. Not for the price that they're offering it at, obviously, because it's not selling. So if they offered, some shitty tequila at $15, just completely dropped the price, I'm sure they'd sell a lot more. But at the price that they're selling it at, I'll give you an example. Who the fuck is going to buy a Casamigos $50 bottle when you can go buy a G4 bottle for $50 and it's fucking 5 times better? The flavors are better. The way it's produced is better. The way the agave is sourced is better. The way that the distillery is run is better. And that's why that brand is run. Right? Expanding their distillery out. So, these numbers, like I mentioned, don't tell the full story. When you look at small, traditional brands, they are growing. They're gaining a lot of new consumers, a lot of new demand. And I actually think they're taking a lot of the demand from, these big brands because they're at a lot of the same price ranges, right? Like look at El Tequileño, you know what I mean? Look at Lalo. Fuck, some of these brands are even cheaper than them. So you're getting better quality for cheaper. Just looking at, economics, that's not going to work out for Bacardi, Casamigos, and Patron. You get me? Like, think about it this way. If Mercedes-Benz suddenly dropped to $25,000 a vehicle, your ass would not be buying a fucking Honda. You'd be like, well, all right, I'm going to go see this M-Benz, I'm go see this Benz over here. But because they're expensive, you give the other brands a chance, right? So, this is, like I said, not the full picture when you think that demand is going away for tequila. But, as I mentioned, big red flag for the overall industry, right? Like, if I was the CRT president, I would be fucking worried right here. We're seeing a potential for a 5% drop in tequila demand. Not many things are reversed here, my friend. You need to be very careful how you tread. And then, how we've been talking about in a lot of other podcasts. A lot of that demand that's fallen from these big brands, people are realizing they're the ones hurting the environment. They're the ones hurting the people, not paying everybody fair wages. Not taking care of, the locales that they're in. Right? So if people are realizing that, that's also why they don't want to buy their shit. Right? Like, I always tell people, I don't protest much, but I protest with my wallet. And a lot of people are that way. You get me? So, a lot of people, once they found out about the ecological damage that the tequila industry, and mezcal, obviously, as well, has caused, they look for the brands that were the opposite of that. So, they want to be at the other side. They want to be getting the products that are benefiting the environment, paying fair wages, and helping people out. You get me? So that's why I mentioned these smaller brands are growing a whole bunch. And a lot of, the big brands like Bacardi, Patron, Casamigos, if you look at their 2023 numbers, it's far worse than the industry as a whole. You see a 5, 10, 15, even some of those brands, 20% drop at the other side, right? So instead of like how these small traditional brands are growing 5, 10, 15, 20%, the big guys are getting murked in the other way. You know what I mean? So the whole industry looks red flag. But in my eyes, I see the right players growing and the bad players not growing. I do not agree with the article on this overall point that this is a bad thing, right? Maybe we do need to fucking lose 20, 30, even 40% of tequila if that percentage of tequila being produced is a piece of shit, okay? That might be good for the environment, the people. Maybe people have less cheap tequila. But, like I mention all the time, that wouldn't be the worst thing ever, okay? I think tequila, in my opinion, and mezcal should be double and triple the price so that people can be, actually incentivized to have polyculture farms with trees and plants and different stuff like cactus and animals. You get me? Because when it's super cheap, it's like the fucking Napa wine. You get me? People always are surprised to learn that Napa is full of Roundup and really horrible agricultural practices. How the fuck do you think they get your $2 chuck, okay? That they get your super cheap $5 wine? They gotta cut 1,000 corners, okay? And it's usually in people and environment. So the same shit happens here in tequila. When you have it's being super cheap. You get me? You don't have that problem in cognac. You don't have that problem in fucking champagne. You get me? Why? Super highly priced shit. They pay their people, most of the brands, obviously, there's always outliers, pretty good. And they fucking take care of the environment. Because they want to maintain this place that brings them in good economics. You get me? So, I know people, consumers especially, won't agree with me there, but let's agree to disagree. You know what I mean? Because, I can fucking pay the extra prices, but a lot of people can't. You get me? So, if fucking you can't agree there, well, sorry, man, So, some other figures they mention, let's get away from that pricing thing. But, some of the numbers that they mention here, they mentioned that about 100 million liters are going into aging every year, right? So, they try to frame this as this is a bad thing, right? Because there's a 5 million liter oversupply, 100 million a year going into aging. What the fuck is going on with the rest of it, right? And here's where stuff can get a little funky or weird, right? Because a lot of tequila could be stored in, steel, not being aged. And it could be stored and kept with its original flavor for a very long time. You get me? There's also bulk storage in these steel containers. And a lot of this tequila is sold to different brands so that they can create their own brand. And it's basically sold wholesale, right? By the tanker. And then these fucking new brands that are coming, say I want to just go start a new brand tomorrow. And I got the money. I just go to one of these big old tequila brands and I say, I want 100 million liters. Let's fucking put my name on it and let's go. And if I got my shit together on the marketing and sales, I'll blow my shit up overnight. You get me? So, once again, I do not see... Well, maybe this is where I differ with a lot of people. Because as an entrepreneur, I see every problem as a business opportunity. So, a lot of the issues they're seeing is oversupply. I'm like, there's a lot of money to be made there. What is fucking people doing? But yeah, you got this 100 million going into aging, right? Let's think about it again. So, you lose 5 to 10% of that, right? 2 to 10%. Let's say a 5% average. Now, that means 5 million liters of that 100 million going into aging are lost every year. So say they're making an añejo, they might lose 15%. Well, it's a little bit different, right? It's not so easy if you know the math, right? Because it's minus 5% the first year, and then it's 5% at 95, and then it's, so on. But let's just make the math easier and just say it's like fucking 12 or whatever percent, right? So they're losing 12% of the tequila to make the añejo. Well, here's where it gets, the entrepreneur in me is like, problem, let's solve this shit, right? So why aren't they building fucking underground storage facilities that are constantly climate cooled at 50, 60 degrees where they have no evaporation? You know what I mean? And they could store it unlimited time in the steel or age it for many years in the wood and lose not much to evaporation. This would solve the problem of losing heavy amounts and people not wanting to put a lot of this oversupply into the aging. This would solve a lot of the demand that people want for aging spirits, or aged spirits, my bad. And at the same time, it may lead to new categories. Because here's the thing. There's whiskey that's 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years fucking aged. Why is tequila not doing the same shit? 3 years is a weak-ass fucking aging, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, it's this new thing, right? The CRT got established in the 90s, and I mean, now they got, in 2006, the añejo, classification. But it's like, why stop there? You know what I mean? One second, this person was texting the fuck out of me. I have to mute the shit out of them. Hate when people do that. Just send one fucking long ass message. Why are you sending me like 10 fucking messages with each of one sentence? If you're a business person and you do that, fuck off. But anyways, back to this podcast. So, let's talk about this, right? I mean, there needs to be new categories. There needs to be a 5-year category for aged tequila. There needs to be a 10, 15, and 20 year. Okay? It's been 20 years since the CRT updated its aging classification. That's a fucking joke. You get me? Like, imagine 20 years ago, nobody even gave a fuck about tequila in America. 80% of the tequila goes to America. Okay? And back in the day, nobody even gave a fuck. So a lot has changed. They need to change the selection. Look, if 80% of tequila, or let me just put this into perspective, data. 2/3 of tequila produced goes to USA or exported elsewhere, right? So globally. So 1/3 stays in Mexico or in storage, whatever, right? And then 80% of that 2/3 of tequila being produced that is exported globally goes to USA. So 80% of tequila exports go to USA. That's pretty fucking gnarly. You know what I mean? And check this out. What does USA love drinking? What do they see as a native spirit, even though maybe it's not, right? But what's a spirit that's been in the history since the founding? What did the founders drink? Whiskey and bourbon. You get me? So, if the market that you're going for is Americans, and these people have drank whiskey for fucking 200-300 years, bourbon, and they're familiar with these aged spirits that are aged for a very long time, why not do this, I don't like the word copy. Why not take inspiration from the whiskey and bourbon industries and start a giant aging of the storage of tequila, right? Or the stored tequila. And now start bringing bigger categories all over the world, right? Because now you're going to have a much more larger selection, right? To give you an example, like even the common shit, some of the the Jack Daniels, that a lot of that shit you go to the store and you buy for like $40-50 sometimes, because it's not the best whiskey, but it's a okay whiskey, I guess, if you don't have a lot of money. A lot of that stuff is like already 5-10 years aged, man. You get me? So it's what people are most buying and used to in America. Now, let me say this too. Why do you think whiskey and bourbon did that? There has been times where whiskey and bourbon blew up, like a couple decades ago. So there's been many points where they've had success and other points where they've been wrecked. You get me? And what do the big whiskey and bourbon brands do when the demand falls so much? They're gonna stop the production? They're gonna just quit? Come on now. That's why a lot of these categories in whiskey and bourbon started being invented of the large aging. Because, say, for instance, bourbon 10 years ago had a surge. You get me? And then now it's going down a lot, right? Well, when it surged, they had this volume of spirits that they could just fucking unleash on the market. You get me? Now the demand's down. I guarantee you a bunch of those big brands are putting a lot of stuff into aged products. Why? Because it's not selling right now. And if you want to keep your distillery alive, you do what I was telling you. You put it into storage and you make older aged stuff, or you put it into steel tanks and you start being a wholesaler of whiskey to a lot of brands, which I've started to see a lot actually in America. There's a lot of these craft whiskey brands. Do your research on them. That's all I'm going to say, because a lot of them are doing what the BS tequilas are, which are just buying wholesale shit, putting their sticker on it, and voila, I got this unique, beautiful whiskey or tequila. It's actually, you do your research, a big piece of shit. So, let's go back to this thing, right? So yeah, big old boom during Corona. Now it's been 2 years of slowdown, right? Except in those small traditional brands, as I've been mentioning to you, right? So, consumers are spending a lot less. I've been calling it a silent depression ever since 2022 in America. But it looks more and more every day to be confirmed. Because, the government says the inflation's low and people are doing well and employed. Go talk to anyone, any business, they'll tell you, the opposite. So I, for one, just really do not believe the Fed, do not believe a lot of these statistics coming out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're skewed. You know what I mean? It's like, as I've told you multiple times, as a historian, you always look at the who, what, where, and why. And it's like the who is very critical here in these statistics, because if you're the federal government and you bring out statistics every month, you obviously don't want to make yourself look like you're doing a piece of shit job, or because they're going to fire the fuck out of the whole department. So you skew that shit all the time. You know what I mean? It's like the consumer price index. They pick and choose how they, say that Americans spend their money. It's so stupid, dude. But whatever. Let's get back to this, right? It's just like people are in a horrible economic time right now. They got less fucking money. You need to take that into account as a business owner, okay? You need to drop prices. You need to be more efficient. You need to do whatever you need to do to make consumers buy your product when they have less money. You get me? Me as an owner, as an agave farmer, a cactus farmer, I've been offering much lower quantities of stuff so that I can still sell a bunch of shit to people, right? So when the economy's good, people are buying 10, 15,000 agaves. They don't mind to pay your price a lot of the time. Right now in tough times, hey man, you got to negotiate a little bit on these big deals. You got to give people a deal. You got to offer more diverse selection so people want to buy more stuff. You got to offer, How do you offer better prices? You start growing it from seed. You grow a whole fuck ton of them. Now you maybe not reselling. Now, you adapt is my point. You get me? Like, if you want to stay in business, you're going to have to find a way to still be selling to these consumers that have less money in their wallet. That's the easiest way I can fucking put it. You get me? So if you were selling a $50 agave, now you better figure out a way to sell maybe a $40 fucking agave, or you're going to go out of business. Okay? And if you still want to sell that $50 agave, you better start providing a better fucking agave. The point is, improvement's coming, whether you like it or not, because consumers are not paying. Okay? This is very applicable to tequila in California. You know what I mean? Because California agave spirits are coming out. People are going to want less of them if they have less money in their pocket. It's a new niche thing, so maybe people want to pay, right? But I'll tell you what, some of these $200-$300 agave spirit bottles coming out of California, people are not going to be buying that shit right now. When it was new and niche, they were like, oh, let's go. But now there's some $40, $50, $60 California agave spirits that are honestly competitive with the Mexican agave spirits. I'll quick plug here. Don Manny agave spirits and, Ventura spirits. Two brands right now that have great prices on their California agave spirits that are very similar to what many tequila and brands are going to be offering their spirits at. But because it's new, niche, and, these two brands in particular are producing it in a very traditional way, then people want to buy that shit. You get me? But it's like, you have to adapt. That's the only way I can put it to you. You know what I mean? And look at it this way, too. It's like right now, they were talking about in this article also about how Trump wants to pass some 25% tariffs on Mexico. Okay, we could talk about a few of these points here, but one of the points here, definitely I've been talking with California, farmer friends, is this is a chance to actually compete, because if tequila is 25% more expensive, then that means they have to, or they're going to sell less. And if the demand is still the same, California agave spirits, if the supply is there, can make up that demand very easily if they're at a competitive price. And that may be a way for them to have a few years of growth that can, push them out into the market. Not that I want tariffs on any country, but you have to be also, thinking about different scenarios. George Foreman, Casamigos, Patron. You think they don't have many economists fucking thinking about this? You're very, very wrong. I've read a lot of articles talking about this, and they're preparing for it. I mean, some of them are talking about selling their fucking tequila portfolios. That's that could go good or bad. You might get a better owner or a worse owner. Like, say, they don't see it profitable and they have to sell it back to a Mexican. That'd be good. But if they sell it to an even worse NGO than them, or a big corporation, that's not better. It might end up worse. So lots of variables there that need to be discussed and talked about, right? But so, like I mentioned, I don't want the tariff to come to anybody, but if the tariff comes, you might as well fucking take advantage of it as a California distiller and farmer and start, using it to put your spirit out on the market. Because now you're going to be at a little bit more of a competitive price now that tequila is a little bit more expensive, right? And, I love tequila. I'm highly against it. Let's hope that scenario does not happen. But if it does happen, California agave spirit brand owners, I highly recommend to you to not waste a moment. And do not, business is business. I'll say that. You know what I mean? It's like, I was reading in this article about how the CRT president is talking about how he doesn't want to waste opportunity to, that agave is on the floor. They talk about how agave was at 30 pesos at the height. Now it's at 1 to 2 pesos, like literally the lowest it could be. it's fucking horrible, right? Businesses are going bankrupt. I've talked about this a lot. Agavero families that are multi-generational just being destroyed. You get me? A lot of that, I know it's very sad, but a lot of it's also their fault for being a monoculture. But let's not get too much into that. The point is, this guy is cheering about how agave prices are on the floor and tequila brands have an opportunity to blow this shit up because they have so much supply of agave that they could produce so much tequila and sell so much more, right? That they need to take advantage of this bust right now. You get me? I see that as a very weird way to look at things. You know what I mean? It's like, I understand you're the CRT president, but actively wishing for agaveros that are, some of them committing suicide and some of them, like I mentioned, going out of business and losing their family, culture, tradition. To be openly cheering for that just because you're going to have your disciples or your participants in your CRT fucking profit more, that just showed me everything about who that person is. You get me? It's like, you shouldn't be cheering that on, bro. Like, without the agavero, tequila ain't shit, the CRT ain't shit, and you ain't shit. Alright? So don't cheer that on, you motherfucker. I mean, it's sad to even hear that phrasing that he used. You know what I mean? And he's talking about it in reference to the tariffs, because he said, oh, if the tariffs happen and agave prices in Mexico are on the floor, then the opportunity will be wasted, because the cheap agave price will be kind of like that the brands have it as an advantage will be taken away by this disadvantage of the tariffs. So it's like, at the end of the day, this guy cares more about profit than fucking humans and the environment. And you know what? That's why a lot of the small brands were protesting out his offices not too long ago. And people want him to resign. So at the end of the day, bro, you're out of touch. I think you need to start talking more to agaveros and get the fuck out your office. Because, yeah, the CRT ain't shit. And you could quote me on that. I always say, don't quote me. You quote me on that one. CRT ain't shit. The CRT ain't shit, and the CRT ain't shit. Alright, now, let's talk about this thing that they mentioned too, which is a 3% drop in USA spirit sales. I mentioned inflation's around 3-4%, so that means spirits pretty much dropped a little bit, like 1%, or they stayed basically flat when you account for the inflation, right? So, and why do I say this, right? Well, if the value of your goods are losing 3-4% in value every year, and you're gaining as a market 3-4% in value, then you really haven't gained anything. The value that you lost, you gained, so you just leveled out. You know what I mean? So that's why economics is important, because they kind of use these numbers to scare and intimidate and get engaged audiences in these news articles, but it's not as black and white as they say it. A lot of the times it's gray, man. It's gray. A lot of shit in life is gray. But yeah, I think, their point of they're scared that there's going to be an influx of a lot of tequila because a lot of the barrel aging isn't past 3 years. And as I explained, that's where the entrepreneurs can come in. They can have climate controlled rooms above ground. Shit, I mean, I've worked on greenhouses that use geothermal from taking, they build a greenhouse on top of a excavated site that they have, where they have a bunch of ducting going from the ground, taking 40 to 60 Fahrenheit air into the greenhouse that is hot as hell in the summer, and they use that in reverse in the winter when temperatures are very, very low in the 10, 20, and 30s to bring the temperatures of 50, 60 Fahrenheit to the surface. So it's like, you can even use geothermal to cool a lot of these aging rooms, man. I mean, the evaporation problem can be easily solved. I don't think that there's going to be this gigantic influx of spirits into the market how they believe. As I mentioned, I think there's going to be new categories I think there's going to be entrepreneurs that build new brands to figure out how to fucking use this supply. Once again, it costs a lot of money for storage. If people are storing shit, it's for a reason. These guys know their business. They're not dumbasses. Give them a little more credit, Financial Times. I think, even if 2 to 10% is lost, that's just because it's a very rudimentary system. They literally just got barrels in fucking above ground, like brick and metal and concrete sheds that were basically like tractor storage prior to a lot of these conversions of aging rooms. So, I don't see it as such a big issue as they believe there. As I mentioned, I think there's a lot of solutions that can be done there to modify the systems. I mean, it's like put it in perspective. It's like nobody wanted aged tequila. You get me? Like, people barely gave a fuck about tequila, and if they gave a fuck about tequila, it was the blancos. You know what I mean? Now, a lot of demand in tequila, a lot of more, consumers of it. Okay, people want some aged stuff. Now they got the reposado and the añejo. But it's like, man, I mean, now that the demand has times 10 since the introduction of or even crazier, but I mean, I estimate, it's at least times 10 since the 90s or whatever when the CRT was introduced. Or even since 2006 when the fucking añejo classification was introduced, then that means that they need to evolve with the industry and create new classifications. So I just think, new CRT leadership maybe is needed to solve some of these issues. I think, as I mentioned, the current president is out of touch and doesn't give a fuck about agaveros. Or small brands, and I think that that's being reflected in this oversupply. He's not connecting with his people and realizing how to utilize their resources to benefit them the best, which is, in my opinion, why I don't think he's a good leader. But you can make your own opinion. Don't just follow my opinion, But yeah, so the CRT president, Gonzalez, also mentioned that he thinks the tariffs won't really pass. He's downplaying them, saying that Trump last time promised some and nothing was delivered. And while I do agree with that, this is a very different time. Biden had a presidency. There has been about a decade in between the last time that this man was, beginning his presidency, right? He began in the beginning of 2016. And now it's 2024. It's about to be 2025. That's 9 years. And the USA is much different. We have a completely different immigration problem. We have a completely different issue with how immigrants and immigration is being seen in America and the United States. And we have, a lot more issues with Latin America after Corona. A lot of countries have collapsed. A lot of new issues, man. To think that he is going to make the same choice or do the same things, it's almost a joke to me. I think that, once again, as a historian, do your who, what, where, and why. And obviously, as the fucking president of the Tequila Regulatory Council, he's not going to say, "Oh, we're all fucked. Let's crash ship here," right? It's like, no, he's going to go out and tell his people, it's all good, until it's not, and they're fucked. And then he says it's not his fault. You know what I mean? That's how these guys play, man. You know what I mean? And, I don't think it's going to end very well for them, to be honest with you. I do think some form of tariffs will be passed, or some form of how should I phrase this? There will be definitely laws passed in between Mexico and America that have to address immigration, that have to address imbalances in trade, and whether you agree with them or not, they're likely going to happen. Okay? I mean, Trump is very unpredictable, and to think that you could predict his next move, I think it's laughable. If I was a tequila brand, I would be preparing just like George Foreman, just like Patron, just like Casamigos for this shit passing. And you better be sure that if it does pass, you have a fucking game plan, okay? Because you're going to be fucked. If this shit goes up 25%, yeah, I mean, let's put it in perspective. Say your bottle's $100, now it's $125, right? So now you're way less competitive. You're more expensive for the consumer. Now, let's say you keep the price the same because you're like, well, fuck this tariff, fuck Trump. I want to still give a $100 bottle to my consumers, and I don't want to lose my sales. All right, man. Cool. Well, now your profit just minus 25. Okay? So minus 25%. Minus $25. Most fucking companies in tequila are running on 10% margin, 20% margin. To lose 25% of their margin is not possible, okay? They're fucking done. Like, done. All right? Their distillery is being fucking auctioned off done. All right? So, once again, if you're a brand in Mexico, my recommendation as an agave consultant is to set a game plan. Get a fucking economist on this in your company and make sure that you have a plan set in place for this. You know, people are like, oh, you want California to fucking prosper and Mexico to go down with the tariffs? Somebody told me that. Fucking noob. Well, check it out. I don't want anybody to win. I don't give a fuck. I'm Mexican and I'm American. It's like when USA and Mexico play in soccer. I win either fucking way. You guys think I'm playing either side or something. It's like, I don't care. I don't care who's in power, who's a politician. I'm a win. All right? So, say it was in reverse and I was the Mexican brand. I would fucking, if the tariff passed, to be honest with you, sell all my shit and start a brand in California. You know why? Because I'm not going to be dealing with tariffs. Okay? Or I would start a second one. So, adapt yourself. And like I mentioned, I don't want anybody to win over the other. But the reality is a different thing. Laws will be passed, and if they're passed, you need to have a fucking game plan. All right? Like, people always say to me, oh, the California AB 2606, what's going to happen if it, like, passes and, like, now you're hella regulated and whatever. Think I'm going to give a fuck, bro? I'm going to be under whatever they regulate, and sorry to California, everything above that regulated acreage, I'm going to take the fucking Arizona and Nevada. I could care less what the fuck California passes. They could suck it, man. At the end of the day, the reason I'm fighting for California agave industries to be equitable is not for me. I have the money to go to Mexico. I have the money to go to another state. I have the money to blow this shit up, sue them, do whatever the fuck I want. This shit is really, at the end of the day, for the other smaller players that are my friends that are going to stay here and don't have another option and will be fucked under heavy regulation. You know what I mean? Point being, no matter who's in power, what's going on, if you're a fucking entrepreneur and you want to win, you'll find a way. You get me? So, I maybe got a little sidetracked there, but going back to the point, if you're a Mexican agave brand, tequila brand, raicilla brand, sotol brand, start building that game plan. It is very likely that will pass, okay? I hope it doesn't pass, but it is very likely some form of something like that will pass. I don't think it's just talk for talk, okay? Trump does bullshit a lot, but I don't think this is one of the things that he's bullshitting about. I would take him very serious on this one. Alright, now let's talk about how, in the article they talk about how there's heavy price cutting from Patron and Casamigos. This is what I actually told people would happen when I saw that their brands were going down double digits, you know what I mean, like in demand. I said they're going to start cutting prices like crazy, and that's what it actually is worth. You get me? Because when there was more demand than supply, they could charge $40, $50 for a bottle of crap and sell a bunch of it. But now that there's other options that are amazing at $40, $50 that are traditionally made, and like I mentioned, these amazing brands, they're not competitive at that price anymore. Look, I'm not buying Patron, Casamigos, and fucking Bacardi brands or whatever. What I'm buying, well, let me put it this way. If their stuff was $15-20, I'd buy it. Why? Not to drink, but to do some jungle juices or whatever to throw a party with. You know what I mean? And at $40-50, I go and I see the Casamigos, and I'm going to get me a Lalo. I'm going to get me a G4. I'm going to get me a Tequileno. Fuck that. Fuck Casamigos. You get me? So they're just seeing the competitiveness. You get me? I think that's why they're dropping prices a lot. Their shit is honestly worth half their prices in the market. The invisible hand is going to get them real soon. You know what I mean? I think that's something that's going to affect them real soon. Now, I wanted to also, I wanted to talk about, what maybe lessons could be learned here, for California distillers and, maybe farmers, you know what I mean? You have to learn from what's going on in Mexico and Australia and Peru and Ecuador and Germany, South Africa, Venezuela, Brazil, any place producing agave spirits or growing agave, you should be trying to take lessons from, right? I tell people all the time, look at what happened to agave cucuy, you know what I mean? Where the government in Venezuela completely banned small-scale production of cucuy and the cultivation of agave cucuy. So their agave spirit is named cucuy, plus their agave is named agave cucuy. It's pretty funny. But, they basically said, fuck small ag, fuck small distillers, let's go only big. And then the quality dropped, people didn't want it anymore, industry started suffering. Venezuela obviously isn't doing too hot. Man, that could be like 1,000 podcasts there. They're in a hellhole right now. But yeah, the lesson there is obviously don't allow the legislation to get away from you as a grower, because you might be outlawed. Shit, let people fear regulation. Imagine that. They might pass a law that says you can't even exist. You know what I mean? And then we're left in the Mexico scenario where we got to go into the fucking mountains like I am over here in the middle of the desert or some shit to produce a spirit. So, get ahead of the curve. Fight legislation in whatever country, state you're in. Don't just let this shit pass, whatever law it is. Even if you like it or you don't like it, talk about it. Talk with people about it. Get out, vote, do all that shit, man. That's the only way you change stuff, But the lesson to be learned from this article, applicable to California distillers and farmers, might be that we need to start thinking about what to do in years of oversupply so the pricing doesn't get screwed. So we don't want to have a 2 to 30 year or 2 to 30 variance on the price, of agave. No, we don't want to have this drastic 99% drop in the price and 99% rise in the price. We want to keep prices consistent by calculating how much agave is needed for the industry and the various other, not just spirits, like biofuels, biomedical research, saponin research, flavinin research, looking at fibers and construction, like insulation and use in concrete. You gauge how much you need, and you start growing that amount. And any agave that is grown in excess, okay, maybe that's what we export to another country so that they can start their agave industry, you know what I mean? Or maybe that's what, we start using in different ways, you know what I mean? It's like for instance, if we have an oversupply of it, maybe that's when, we identify that that new industries need to be created ahead of the time, right? So if we see an oversupply coming, we might want to start creating a new forage industry, or we might want to start creating a new biofuel industry so that we avoid these oversupplies. Or maybe we want to use the oversupply, how I mentioned, to our advantage. and start creating lines of aged California agave spirits, aged USA agave spirits that might be 3, 5, 10 years, right? Because I tell you what, the most aged shit I've seen is 3, 6 months, 1 year in California agave spirits, and that ain't shit compared to some of the aged spirits in Mexico. So we need to start those programs. We need to see that coming up soon. We need to see that development, and we need to be proactive about it and not wait for the oversupply. Create it today. Why not today say, okay, California agave spirits, we're going to have a form of a reposado, a form of an añejo, and even better than a 1 in 3 year age cured spirit or whatever, we're going to do a 5 year, a 10 year, a 20 year category. And even before this oversupply comes, we get ahead of the curve. You get me? Or put it this way, if we see, much like tequila is dropping in prices and stuff, we need to have game plans. We need to have game plans for maintaining competitiveness of the California agave spirit industry, California agave industry. And as I just mentioned, it's just, we need to have these discussions. We need to have these lessons being explored and talked about so that we can learn and make sure to apply them to our industry and make sure to not make the same mistakes. Or if we see certain problems that arise that lead to solutions, maybe we can take inspiration from those, right? So, yeah. Wow, I've been talking about this almost for an hour. This article, it's only a few minute read, but obviously lots of opinions and implications of the stuff they bring up. So that's why I love these podcasts, because none of you are going to watch an hour-long video, but you could be working and listening to this hour-long podcast. So that's why I think it's a great way to educate people about agave spirits, and cactus and all of that, right? But hope you learned something today. Hope you go read the article, and I hope that you are always expanding your agave knowledge, and you're improving yourself as a farmer, distiller, processor, a consumer, as an academic, everything. You get me? I was talking the other day with an agave researcher that's like big time, and then I was like correcting him on certain stuff, and he was correcting me on certain stuff, and it's like, don't get butthurt too when people are like trying to discuss shit with you and call you out. Oh, this species might be a different cultivar, or that might be a different use, or whatever, right? Like, be open to new ideas. That's how you stay at the top of your game as an entrepreneur, as an agavero, as a tlachiquero, as a, tequilero, whatever you want to fucking call yourself, right? But yeah, let's keep on improving. And like I said, hope you learned something today. Thanks for listening to the podcast, and have a great new year, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. I'll catch y'all at another time. Peace out, everyone.